there. Welcome into the College Basketball Bracket Science YouTube channel and podcast network, your encyclopedia for the college basketball season and beyond. I am your host, Brandon Jedic. It is Tuesday, March 10th, about 9:30 here on the East Coast. We're in the heart of conference championship week. A lot of bids have already been punched. A lot of power conferences are getting started actually tonight on Tuesday. Yesterday, we did a whole show on just previewing every single conference tournament, some that have already happened and the ones that are starting this week. This show is going to be strictly bracketology. There's going to be no results, no nothing. We're just going to talk bracketology the entire way, talk about the numbers, the bubble. Teams are starting to separate from the bubble. Teams are starting to move their way back into the bubble. NC State, SMU, you're not leaving here without catching a few little hardships, as it's been a rough couple weeks for both of these teams. So we're going to talk about those bubble implications. So the show today is going to be the full field of 68 that I have released, top 68 teams, with those automatic qualifiers that I've already punched, with not the navies anymore, like the teams like Lehigh, who are now the favorites in their respective conference to make the NCAA tournament. So a whole updated 68 team field. We'll talk the bubble watch. We'll talk the numbers behind it. That's going to be the entire show today. Before diving into it, just be sure to hit that like button before heading out. Subscribe to the show. Turn on post notifications. I'll be back on Thursday just to talk more about the conference tournaments that have been going on. And then on Friday is going to be another bracketology show, as we are 5 days away from Selection Sunday. So we have to talk about it as much as we can to prepare. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Bracket Science with 2S. I've been posting 5 times a day on there or so. Just been busy throughout this conference championship week. Check out our website, bracketscience.org, all coaching carousel stuff, all our content condensed into one, along with all the conference tournament brackets and such stuff like that. So let's dive right into it. Without further ado, let's talk about these teams. So we talk about the one seeds all the time, but I am going to talk more about the numbers in this particular episode, just because we have more time. We're not talking results and how that changed the the seed line. We'll talk about a couple results once we get to Santa Clara and Gonzaga, as they just played last night. But outside of that, not a ton to talk about. So here's the Bart Torvik team sheet. You can find it down below in the description if you would like to check it out on your own time. But there was a change at the one seed line. So obviously after UConn lost to Marquette, Florida is now your last number one seed. So it's Duke as your number one overall seed. Now, the big thing with Duke right now, Patrick Gamba and Caleb Foster have injuries that haven't come out just how bad they are. I would guess that John Shire would put it under the covers until, they are seeded in the NCAA tournament, because the committee does seed you based on the roster you have going into the tournament. So without Gamba, without Caleb Foster, two starters, two, veteran pieces, maybe the committee, I don't believe in this sort of thing, but the committee has done it like they did with JT Toppin. They moved Texas Tech from a 3 to a 4 seed in their initial bracket reveal. In this case, would they maybe move Duke behind Michigan and Arizona? I hope not. They beat Michigan, so they should be ahead of Michigan. But the selection committee does crazy things. So I would expect them to keep those injuries, just saying, hey, they're day to day for now, even if, they're happening maybe to have surgery or something, something bad. But still have Duke as number one seed, Michigan as number 2 overall seed. Michigan went 19-1 in the Big Ten. For those who follow our, a little bit of our betting content and the future betting stuff, I did, when they came out with the over-under and conference tournament wins, I did 4 separate bets. 3 of them hit. The 4th one was Michigan. I said under 17.5 wins in the Big Ten, because I'm if you go 17-3, that is super hard to do. I would say more 16-4, no matter how good of a team you are. They went 19-1. That was the bet I was most confident in, going, under 17.5. That's way too much for the Big Ten. 19-1. This team has been absolutely dominant the entire season. Just crazy good stuff. Arizona right there. These 3 are locks to be number 1 seeds. Florida, like I said, jumped UConn to be that 4th number 1 seed. So let's pull up and kind of compare what we're looking for the last number 1 seed. You can find Florida here. This is separated by net. Florida is 4th in the net. UConn is 9th in the net. The resume-based metrics pretty much flipped after UConn's loss at Marquette. So UConn was 4th in every resume-based metric, KPI, strength of record, and wins above bubble. And yet Florida was 5th in every one. Now they flipped in every single one except strength of record. UConn technically is 4. Florida is 5. However, go to the predictives. Every single one leads Florida by a lot. 2, I know UConn has the head-to-head over Florida. However, there's just too much of a gap in the resume, in my opinion. Florida's 11-5 in quad 1. UConn is 7-2. UConn's 16-3 inside the first 2 quadrants. Florida's 17-6. They have one more win, and UConn has a quad 3 loss. Florida does not have. To me, the resumes are separable enough where the head-to-head doesn't come into effect, because I actually have UConn as the second 2 seed right now. It's really close. There's an argument for them to be the first 2 seed. However, with that quad 3 loss, Houston is the other one who's going to be our first 2 seed. Let's compare Houston to UConn. Houston is 7, UConn is 9. So all the resume-based metrics lean UConn. All the predictives lean Houston. However, move over to the quadrants. UConn 7-2 in quad 1, Houston 7-5, advantage UConn. However, Houston 11-0 in quad 2 compared to UConn 9-1. So Houston has 18 quad 1 plus quad 2 wins. UConn only has 16. Plus, UConn does have that quad 3 loss, which Houston doesn't have. The reason I have Houston over UConn is just because Houston's losses are so much better, as crazy as that might sound. Like UConn, if you lose one to, like, they lost to Creighton, you're like, all right, that's a quad 3 loss. That's not very good. But hey, it happens one time. Look at TCU. TCU lost to New Orleans early in the season. You lose one, okay, that's fine. Now you've lost 2 of them. You lost at Marquette as well, a sub-500 team, 2 non-tournament teams. Houston hasn't lost to a non-tournament team. That's why I gave it to Houston as that 2 seed. All right, so moving on along the 2 seeds. Michigan State is your next 2 seed, so they lost that game to Michigan. However, they competed pretty well. They're 7th in wins above bubble, 7th in strength of record. Predictives are pretty well across the board. They don't have any losses outside of quadrant 1. I think they're Nebraska and Iowa State definitely have a chance to climb up in that 2 seed category, but I do think there's a gap between Michigan State and Illinois to Nebraska and Iowa State. Nebraska's close, but definitely to Iowa State, in my opinion. And then Illinois as your next 2 seed, just kind of plugging along. Resume-based metrics aren't awesome. They're 12th in strength of record, 11th in wins above bubble. Predictives are really good, especially with 6 quad 1A wins, which is good for tied for 3rd in the country. 14-7 inside the first 2 quadrants, 0 losses outside of quadrant 1. Illinois, really good resume going forward. Nebraska is right there as a potential 2 seed. Like I said, they're 8th in wins above bubble, 8th in strength of record, which is, better than the likes of Illinois. However, Illinois does have them in KPI. I'm not a huge fan of KPI, but Illinois, it is on the team sheet, and Illinois is better there. And Illinois has a way better predictive average than Nebraska. In fact, it is exactly 10 points better, 5.7 compared to 15.7. Nebraska 14-5 inside the first 2 quadrants. Illinois 14-7 inside the first 2 quadrants. So if you want to make that argument that Nebraska could be there, they obviously split the head-to-head. I think it's Illinois just because those predictives are so much better, but Nebraska's right there. And then Iowa State with some high-end wins. However, the reason I got them is at the 3 seed, which the committee didn't really value that much when, they put Iowa as the 4th number 1 seed when they did their bracket reveal a couple weeks ago, was that they've kind of struggled a little bit away from home. I know they won at Purdue. Purdue's still a 3 seed. We'll talk about Purdue because I don't know how their metrics have them as a 3 seed, but they won at Purdue. But outside of that, in Big 12 play, they've played really well at Hilton, have kind of struggled a little bit on the road. I have them as a 3 seed. I think they're like pretty much a lock to be a 3 seed at this point, in my opinion. They can get up to a 2 seed anything can happen in the Big 12. They are going to have a lot of opportunities to move the needle, but I think they're pretty solid on the 3 line. All right, let's talk about Purdue because it's amazing to me that this team is still a 3 seed. They've been playing really, really bad basketball. They're 10th in the net still. Look at their metrics, 12th in wins above bubble. That puts you at a 3 seed, 12th in KPI. They are 16th in strength of record. Look at their predictives. How is this team 8th at KenPom? Now, I'm the biggest KenPom believer there is. I don't know how this team is 8th at KenPom. I don't think this team's very good. Look at their 8th at Torvik as well and 9th in BPI. So it's not just KenPom, but look at their quadrants. They're 8-8 inside quad 1. That's really, really good. There's only 4 teams in the country with double-digit quad 1 wins. Those are your 4 1 seeds. Purdue has 8 of them. That's pretty solid. They don't have any losses outside of quadrant 1. This team's lost a lot at home. However, it just has been leaning towards it being the right teams that they're losing to at home. They're all quad 1 games, obviously. And with 8 quad 1 wins, this team is a 3 seed. I don't think they're 3 seed quality. I think they're more like 4 or 5 seed quality. However, the metrics would have them as a 3 seed right now. I know that's going to be, kind of an unpopular one to have them as a 3 seed. I got Alabama as the next 3 seed. I do see some other bracketology out there, and everyone's different. That's why there's a committee. Some people value more things than other. A lot of people I've seen have Gonzaga over Alabama. I'm not quite 100% sure why. Let's pull up their metrics, compare the two. So maybe it's because Gonzaga is 6th in the net and Alabama is 17th in the net. Now, these little numbers that you see next to the team where it's like Gonzaga 4, Alabama 3, this is their seed, but this is technically based on like the Bart Torvik metrics that they use to influence their seeding. So he actually has Alabama as a 3 and Gonzaga as a 4. I feel like the more popular one I've seen is Gonzaga as a 3, Alabama as a 4. But let's compare them. So when you look at the resume-based metrics, Alabama is, I don't know why they're kind of just flying under the radar. They're 9th in strength of record, 9th in wins above bubble, 8th in KPI. That's like first 3 seed category right there. Gonzaga 16th in wins above bubble, 11th in strength of record. However, I would definitely argue that Gonzaga maybe had a stronger non-conference. I mean, I wouldn't say by a lot. Then you move over to the quadrants, like Gonzaga is 6-2 inside quad 1. Alabama is 7-7. Obviously, Alabama is going to have a lot more opportunities in the SEC compared to the WCC. Alabama's 16-8 inside the first 2 quadrants. Gonzaga is 10-2. Gonzaga has that quad 3 loss against Portland that Alabama doesn't have, with way better, resume-based averages. Like 8.7 compared to 15.3 is a big gap. These resume-based numbers, if we've learned anything, it's that, I do like to say that, the resume gets you in, and then the predictives really do influence seeding, and that is true in a sense. But I still do believe that the committee will value the WAB metric, the wins above bubble, and the strength of record metric a little bit more than the predictives, in my opinion. Like we've seen with some of these teams with severe gaps, the South Carolinas of when they were the 6 seed, the Missouri when they were a 7 seed. They still had those teams as 6 or 7 seeds when their resume averages were like in the 20s and the predictives were in the 50s. Hopefully you're following me here. Hopefully that makes sense. So I think a gap of 8.7 to 15.3 is just too big. I know Gonzaga's predictive metrics average out to 10.3, which actually isn't like awesome. Like it's good. Like you're 11th at KenPom. Like that's still good, but it's not enough to really boost them, in my opinion. So 10.3 compared to Alabama 15.7. Definitely a boost there for Gonzaga. However, every single resume-based metric leaning towards Alabama, better, more quad 1 wins, more quad 1A wins. I know there's more losses as well, but they also don't have a quad 3 loss. I think it's Alabama. I mean, 9th in wins above bubble. That's really good. I think this wins above bubble metric, I'm curious to see just how much that the selection committee does value this, because I think this is going to start being the one where it's like you sort it by wins above bubble 1 through, however many you're going through, 45 or whatever. For these at-large teams, and I think it's going to really start being the sort of the baseline of where to start in terms of seeding these teams. So I'm giving it to Alabama over Gonzaga. Curious to see if that wins above bubble metric is going to continue to be maybe our most important metric going forward by the selection committee, because they do seem to really be pushing it. All right, let's move on. So I have Gonzaga as that first 4 seed. They just beat Oregon State last night. Wayne Tinkle's last game ever as an Oregon State head coach. He gave it a good run here. He got them to the semifinals of this conference tournament. Was a 4 seed, but Gonzaga just a little bit too much. Virginia, I also seriously gave a look at Virginia to be the last 3 seed, maybe even above Gonzaga. I gave it to Gonzaga because of those predictive metrics compared to Virginia. But Virginia, like we just talked about, Alabama 9th in strength of record, 9th in wins above bubble. Virginia's 10th in strength of record and 10th in wins above bubble. Predictives aren't quite as good. 17th in Torvik, 20th in KenPom, 23rd in BPI. However, their quad boxes are better than both of these other teams. They're 3-1 in quad 1A, 6-3 in quad 1, 9-2, 9-1 in quad 2, 15-4 inside the first 2 quadrants compared to Alabama's 16-8. Now, what this strength of record and wins above bubble metric is supposed to do is, not all the quad 1 games are created equal. Not all the quad 2 games are created equal. There's high-end quad 1 games, which is quad 1A, but there's even high-end quad 1A games, low-end quad 1A games. That strength of record and wins above bubble is supposed to kind of differentiate these quad boxes. It's supposed to account for every, exact ranking of the teams you play. And with Alabama being higher in those and better predictive metrics, they have better resume metrics and better predictive metric averages. So that's why I do have Alabama as that 3 seed. And then Gonzaga and Virginia, it's kind of a coin flip in my opinion. I did give it to Gonzaga just with 10.3 predictive average compared to Virginia 20 resume average. I gave it to Gonzaga in that, predictive average. All right, moving on, let's talk about Kansas as your next 4 seed. Kansas, kind of one of those teams where I think they're going to end up being either a 4 or a 5 seed. Have them as a 4 seed right now. There's obviously the whole Darren Peterson saga that's been going on. So Kansas has they have really high-end wins. And I would kind of argue that they don't have the greatest losses. They've suffered a couple weird losses. However, they only have 1 loss outside of quad 1. It's a quad 2 loss. They're 15-9 inside the first two quadrants. They have 6 quad 1A wins, which is tied for third in the country. That is really, really good. Have them as a 4 seed right now. I think that Purdue, Alabama, Gonzaga, Virginia, Kansas, maybe throw Texas Tech in the equation. We're starting to see Texas Tech start to struggle without JT Toppin as kind of expected. So those like 5 teams all kind of vying for these last 2-3 seeds, in my opinion. Maybe you can throw Texas Tech just with the real high-end wins, but the committee already said that they already dropped them one seed line because of the JT Toppin injury. Now, Texas Tech not playing too great without him. So we'll see what happens there. So I do have Texas Tech as the next 4 seed. Just sucks that they had to lose JT Toppin for the entire season because he was going to be a potential player, probably second in line for player of the year. However, if it came down to it, Texas Tech beat Duke on a neutral. If Texas Tech would have climbed up to like a 2 seed, made the Final Four or something, and Duke's also in the Final Four, maybe there's an argument for JT Toppin player of the year, but unfortunately went down with an injury. Christian Anderson and Donovan Atwell going to have to shoot their way to a Final Four if they want to get all the way there. So got Texas Tech as that last 4 seed. Arkansas is the first 5 seed. To me, these 5 seeds are kind of set in stone right now. Sort of. We'll talk about North Carolina here in a second. The first 3 5 seeds kind of set in stone for sure. Arkansas has just been hovering on like this first 5 seed forever. I feel like they're good. I like this team. I think there's a chance that they can climb up to that 4 line. Now, Texas Tech and Arkansas, I know there's the head-to-head that Arkansas did beat Texas Tech. However, I don't think the resume is quite close enough to boost Arkansas over Texas Tech. Texas Tech has better resume averages, better predictive averages. However, if you want to throw and say JT Toppin is out for the season, their best player is out for the season, and Arkansas beat them on a neutral, I'm perfectly fine with that, throwing Arkansas into that 4 line and moving Texas Tech back to the 5. However, Texas Tech still, I know without, even they picked up one of the wins without JT Toppin. They still have probably the best overall wins in the country, them or Wisconsin. So I gave it to Texas Tech, but I understand the argument for Arkansas to be above Texas Tech with that head-to-head with JT Toppin out. Vanderbilt as your next 5 seed, just kind of cruising along. Good metrics across the board. I would agree this isn't the most dangerous team in the country, but they can shoot their way to making the second weekend in March Madness. St. John's is actually your automatic qualifier out of the Big East right now. If you see that little asterisk, that's what that means. After winning the Big East regular season, St. John's just kind of screams 5 seed to me. And then North Carolina, I looked a lot at North Carolina versus Wisconsin versus Tennessee. The hardest thing to do, and this is going to be like the worst season for it, is kind of predict how the committee is going to judge these teams based on the injuries that they've had. So Caleb Wilson, obviously, unfortunately, out for the rest of the season as well. And they just lost that game to Duke. They've played fine without Caleb Wilson, but it's definite like this team's not as good without Caleb Wilson. Obviously, he's probably going to be a top 5 draft pick. He should be on an All-American team somewhere. So if you want to put the argument that say, like I do believe that North Carolina should be ahead of Tennessee right now, at least just because their North Carolina's resume base averages out to 17 compared to Tennessee 24. Tennessee is better in the predictive metrics. North Carolina is better in the quad boxes. I think it's North Carolina for sure. If you want to have the argument to throw Wisconsin up at the 5, just because kind of like Texas Tech, if they have some of the best wins in the country, I'm fine with that. I'm not quite all the way there. They have Wisconsin has a quad 3 loss. They're 13-8 inside the first 2 quadrants, 8-7 in quad 1. Resume averages out to 23 compared to North Carolina 17. That's why I gave it to North Carolina. Like I said, I don't really like penalizing teams because of injuries because it's a freak accident. It wasn't like they were trying to do this. So there's an argument for Wisconsin to be that last 5 seed. Tennessee also there if they were to, really penalize North Carolina for that injury. Louisville, after that great win at Miami, finally picked up their first quad 1A win. So Louisville now 1-8 inside of quad 1A, 7-9 inside of first quadrant in total. They have really good predictives. They're 14th at KenPom, 13th at Torvik. So I have them up as a 6 seed right now. BYU is still also a 6 seed. None of these last 2, even now, I'll throw Louisville in that conversation. Louisville, BYU, all these 7 seeds, all these 8 seeds, none of them really deserve these last 2 6 seeds, in my opinion. I think your safest bet right now is Louisville. I think Louisville would definitely be a 6 seed right now. And then I think it's BYU. BYU's resume is not as bad as you might think. They're 13-10 inside the first 2 quadrants, 27th strength of record, 23rd in wins above bubble, This compares out to the likes of St. Mary's, Villanova, Miami, Florida, Kentucky. I think your safest pick right now is BYU. Bart Torvik also has BYU as a 6 seed. I'll pull that one up here. St. Mary's I have as the first 7 seed, so they obviously just lost. If they'd have beaten Santa Clara, I actually made, I do the bracketology like the night before, and then I update it in the morning before I record this. If St. Mary's would have beat Santa Clara, there's a real chance they could have been the 6 seed. However, they lost to Santa Clara. So I have them as the first 7 seed. They're 26th in wins above bubble compared to BYU's 23rd. They're 30th in strength of record compared to BYU's 27th. Predictives are, a little bit better for St. Mary's. However, those resume-based metrics just a little bit better, and 13 wins inside the first 2 quadrants for BYU compared to 9 for St. Mary's. I would definitely hear out the argument that St. Mary's is better than BYU, especially right now. And BYU also in the same boat as Texas Tech and, North Carolina without, one of their most important players in Richie Saunders. So we'll see how the committee values that. But I would have BYU than St. Mary's right now. Right behind them is Villanova, Miami, and Kentucky. This is kind of the mush, in my opinion, of the bracket. All these teams are very, very similar. So Villanova just doesn't quite have the high-end wins. Villanova's 33rd in the net, so they'll actually be on the second graphic that you can find here. The first graphic's top 30. 24.3 average in resume-based metrics. That's pretty good. The predictives aren't great. They don't have a quad 1A win. They only have 2 quad 1 wins, and they do have a quad 3 loss. They haven't played the toughest schedule, however. Must be some of the higher end quad 3, quad 4 games because, their strength of record is pretty solid. But I just don't think they have enough high level wins to be kind of considered for that last 6 seed. And then when you move on, we'll talk about Miami, Florida, who's also played a pretty weak schedule. They didn't have to go to the West Coast swing. They didn't have to play Cal and Stanford, who was like on the bubble. Both teams playing well. We'll talk about Stanford here, in a little bit. But and they also didn't have to play Duke in the ACC. And then Kentucky, right behind them, just what do you do with Kentucky? They're 28th in wins above bubble. I know they have a lot of high-level wins. They have 5 quad 1 wins. They also have 10 quad 1 losses. So they have 10 quad 1 plus quad 2 wins and 12 losses, so 10 and 12 inside the first 2 quadrants. Played a very tough schedule. However, 28th in wins above bubble, 29th in strength of record. Not enough. I got them as a 7 seed right now. And moving on to the 8 seeds, I would actually go Georgia, then Clemson. However, Clemson does have a neutral site head-to-head over Georgia. So I give it to Clemson as your first 8 seed with Georgia as the second 8 seed. Right behind them, Utah State just kind of plugging around. A couple of these mid-majors, like Utah State, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with. I could see this team being a 7 seed. I could also see this team like being a 10 seed. So I'm not 100% sure on Utah State because like we've seen a couple times, most notably a couple seasons ago, where the committee really did not value these Mountain West teams too high. Remember, New Mexico won the conference tournament and everyone was like, oh, they were going to be in no matter what. And then the committee said, no, they weren't going to be in unless they won the conference tournament. And everyone's like, really? Everyone was seated a little lower than you might have thought. Utah State could be one of those teams this season. However, I think their metrics average out to about an 8 seed right now. And then how about UCLA? Been playing pretty good basketball as of late. Got them as the final 8 seed right now with, just depending on where they play their first game of the NCAA tournament. If it's on the West, they'll probably win a game. If it's in the East, they probably will not win a game. They're kind of just all over the place with this whole travel situation. Alrighty, on the other side of the break, we're going to go to the right side of the bracket, and we're going to start talking about the bubble. We'll be right back.
To announce my new partnership with WalterPicks. WalterPicks is the go-to app for sports data and sports science. They just introduced a new mock bracket builder where even before Selection Sunday, you can now dream up brackets. You can look at potential first-round matchups, compare and contrast the teams. You can dream up a Final Four based on the projected field. Do all that with the new mock bracket builder. Also, be sure to check out the College Basketball Advanced Metrics and Analysis. You can look at all the fun stats that we talk about on Bracket Science, the overall efficiencies, offensive and defensive efficiencies, strength of schedule for seed line purposes and bracketology purposes. You can also check out the pace that these teams play at for betting purposes. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, what percent of your points come from the three-point line to take that mid-major over the power conference team. Right now, you can try premium for 14 days, just $5.41 a month for a ton of betting purposes. Be sure to sign up with creator code SCIENCE, SCIENCE. That's code SCIENCE at checkout. Remember, it's WalterPicks. Download the app.
Alrighty, let's talk about the right side of the graphic where the 9 seeds start off with Texas A&M. Texas A&M, who did they just beat? I can't even remember who they just beat. They just picked up a a big win to really boost their metrics. They're now 37th in wins above bubble and 32nd in strength of record. That moved the needle, moved them from a 9 seed to, or excuse me, from a 10 seed to they just won at Texas. That's who it was. So move them from the 10 seed to a 9 seed. I have Miami of Ohio as a 9 seed. I'm telling you, this team is going to be seeded higher than you think. I know a lot of people are going to put them as like an 11 seed, just put them in there because of those predictive metrics. They are now, let me find them here in the team sheet metric. They're 53rd in the net, 21st in strength of record, and 31st in wins above bubble. That's not 11 seed. I know they're predictives. They're 91st at KenPom, 84th at Torvik. You can make the argument. One of their games just turned to a quad 2 games. I don't remember which game it was, but they only had one quad 2 win. So they're now 2-0 in quad 2. I know they don't have any quad 1 wins or obviously any quad 1A wins. 21st in strength of record, 31st in wins above bubble. This team's going to be seeded better than you might think. I could see them getting all the way up to, if they were a 7 seed, I wouldn't argue it. This team has beaten every single team. I think they're deserving of not having to be an 11 seed and have to play a 6 seed. Like if you're like Miami of Ohio and you draw Tennessee in the first round, like come on now, you can't do that to a team that's undefeated. I think they're gonna, if they run the MAC tournament, I'll probably predict them as a 8 seed. If not, I think they'll be a 9 seed. I've had them slotted here for quite a while. I'm confident that this team will not be like an 11 seed, but we'll see. I've been wrong many times before, but I think this team's going to be seeded better than you might think. St. Louis is starting to fall a little bit. They just got drilled by George Mason. They're still your automatic qualifier out of the A10. I think they're, I don't know if they're like completely a lock. They're 40th in wins above bubble, 34th in strength of record. Like don't lose your first game. However, they're 2-0 in quad 1 and 3-3 in quad 2, 5-3 inside the first quadrants. They do have a quad 3 loss, but their metrics are still fine. I think they're going to be safe to be in the tournament. Then how about TCU climbing all the way up to a 9 seed? They've been playing really, really good basketball. I think this team has a good chance to win a game in the tournament. David Punch is awesome. I like this team. Jamie Dixon's done a fantastic job after suffering a loss to New Orleans on opening night. 10 seeds, Iowa and Ohio State. I would probably have Ohio State over Iowa in terms of metrics. However, Iowa does have the head-to-head over Ohio State. They might actually match up in the Big Ten tournament in the third round, it would be. So I might be playing for, maybe a seed line or two there. These teams are comfortably in the field, but don't like lose your first game and, maybe have to go to Dayton. Santa Clara, after their big victory over St. Mary's last night, I think are going to be in the field. That's not the right graphic. My apologies. Here we go. 38th in the net, if you can find them there. So after that big win, they're 36th in wins above bubble. That's good enough. That is good enough to get you into the field, in my opinion. Predictives still aren't awesome. 49th in BPI, 34th at KenPom. They have that quad 4 loss, which is lingering, that game to Loyola Chicago. If they didn't have that, we're probably talking in Santa Clara in an 8-9 game. With that quad 4 loss, I think they're up to a 10 seed right now, and I think it's going to be a 3-bid WCC. Obviously, it would be better for the WCC if Santa Clara were to win and just leave no doubt, because obviously St. Mary's and Gonzaga are going to be in. But even with a loss to Gonzaga in the championship game, I think Santa Clara is going to have enough meat on the bones to get into the NCAA tournament. And then UCF is our final 10 seed. UCF has been struggling a lot as of late. However, I think they're still fine. You can find them at 51st on this graphic. They were like hovering around the 20-ish spot in strength of record and wins above bubble. After a little bit of a losing streak, they're now 38th in wins above bubble, which is fine. Like I said, if you're inside the top 40, you're in pretty good shape. If you're inside the top 45, it's like, you better be careful. I mean, this year might be a little different because the bubble is just god-awful. And then, 28th in KPI, average of 35.7. That's fine. However, with not very good predictives across the board, this could be a team that I would not be surprised if they put them in Dayton, especially with how they've been playing as of late. All right, you know what? I'm going to switch graphics and talk about this bubble graphic. So like we said, 10 seeds, Santa Clara, UCF. Now our first 11 seeds in and out of the last 4 buys, Missouri and NC State. Missouri, I want to see Missouri get into the tournament. I think they deserve to get into the tournament. They're 60th in the net. You can find them down here. They're 41st in wins above bubble and 37th in strength of record. So, a little bit worse wins above bubble. Like I said, I'm valuing this wins above bubble metric quite a bit. KPI definitely favors UCF over Missouri by a lot, by 23 spots, which is why UCF's average is 35.7 compared to Missouri 43. Missouri's 10 and 11 inside the first 2 quadrants. However, look at those predictives. Not very good. That's why I'm worried about them having to go to Dayton. However, I think they're in decent enough shape to be an 11 seed right now. And then NC State, they've been playing terrible. Lost 4 in a row. They are 35th in the net. However, they're 43rd in wins above bubble and 45th in strength of record. Like I said, try and be inside that top 45. If there's any bid stealers, some of these teams better start to be careful. Just a quick note before we talk about the last 4 in, evanmia.com, who's a really good analytics website, has he came out with a tweet where he said he actually ran the numbers on how the bubbles compare to each other in terms of worst bubbles. This is actually the worst bubble we've had in, oh God, I should have looked at the stat. It's the worst bubble we've had in maybe 10 years. It's not good. Teams are losing like crazy. The analytics aren't great for a lot of these teams. So yeah, really bad bubble. So if you hear me talking about it a lot, like this bubble's terrible. It is actually statistically the worst bubble we've had in a really long time. So your last 4 in, Texas moves back into the last 4 in. However, what I say, I'll talk about Texas and VCU. They're in much better shape. I mean, be careful with some bid stealers. However, I think they would kind of have to do a lot to miss the field. I think these teams are kind of more trying to move out of Dayton, while SMU and Stanford are like, God, hang on for dear life. So let's talk about Texas here. You can find them at 42nd here in the net. So they're 44th in wins above bubble. Like I said, they're really close to the likes of, someone like NC State, who's 43rd in wins above bubble. UCF's 38th. Missouri's 41st. So they're all kind of around the same spot. I think all these teams are somewhat safe. Like I said, be careful, but you're still fine. And then VCU, you can find at 44th here. They're 42nd in wins above bubble. So they're all in the same category. VCU, only 4-7 inside quad one plus quad 2, while Texas actually in general has 6 quad 1 wins. Now, Texas has a quad 3 loss, has more losses than VCU. So it can go either way, but just with 6 quad 1 wins compared to VCU having 4 inside the first 2 quadrants. That's why I have Texas over VCU and why I think Texas will be fine with 6 quad 1 wins. I'd be shocked if they were left out of the field, especially with decent metrics across the board. So go Texas, VCU, and then SMU and Stanford. So two ACC teams. Let's talk about both these teams. SMU is not playing good. They're 48th in wins above bubble. Like I said, any other year, this team would probably be outside the field looking in. They're 47th in strength of record. However, the bubble is so bad that they're probably in decent shape. 4-8 inside quad 1, 4-4 in quad 2, so 8-12 inside the first 2 quadrants. Not terrible for a bubble team, but be careful if there's any bid stealers. SMU could be on the wrong side. Now, then we'll talk about, you'll have to look down a little bit, is Stanford. I have Stanford in the field right now. I know their wins above bubble metric is 49th, but they have 5 quad 1 wins. I find it hard to believe that the committee would leave them out with 5 quad 1 wins. 4-2 inside quad 2. So they're positive in the first 2 quadrants, 9-8. That's really good. However, what's the eyesore on here? 3 quadrant 3 losses. That is not good whatsoever. However, just with those 5 quad 1 wins and with the lack of any other team who really deserves it, I think it's Stanford right now. It's really close. I battled back and forth between Stanford and, you can see here, I have Virginia Tech as the first team out. I know people aren't going to want to hear it, I don't want to hear it, but Indiana and Auburn might still have a chance if they can do some things in their conference tournaments. I even think the rest of these teams kind of have a chance just because SMU and Stanford are, like we said, SMU's 48th in wins above bubble, Stanford's 49th. A couple of these other teams don't quite have that wins above bubble metric. However, if I wanted to frame it hey, I put Cal as the last team in the tournament. Hey, I put West Virginia as the last team in the tournament. I think I could convince some people. I think there's an argument for pretty much all these teams. I think if I really just came out and said Auburn is 45th in wins above bubble, 44th in strength of record, that's better than all of these bubble teams, put them in the tournament. Some people would believe me. I think it's crazy that their strength of record is 44th when they are barely above 500. I don't think this team deserves to be anywhere near the bubble. Same goes for Indiana. Indiana is 6-13 inside the first 2 quadrants. Get that team out of the tournament. I don't think they should be anywhere close. However, they're 47th in wins above bubble, which is better than a team like Stanford. However, Stanford has the high-end wins. Stanford 9-8 inside quad 1 and quad 2 compared to 6-13, like we said for Indiana. However, there's so many metrics across the board that are so different for every single team. When you look at someone like Cal, I know I said it's hard to find a team with a decent quad 1 win total left out of the tournament. They're 4-6 in quad 1. However, they're only 6-9 inside the first 2 quadrants, 6-1 in quad 3. So they do have a quad 3 loss. They're 50th in wins above bubble, which is, close to the likes of someone like Stanford. But I just don't think there's enough meat on cow's bones. New Mexico, I don't think this team deserves to be in the tournament. I don't think pretty much any of these teams deserve to be in the tournament, but they're 52nd in wins of a bubble, 58th in strength of record. They are 8-7 inside the first two quadrants, which isn't bad. However, 4-2 in quad three. So kind of a similar-ish resume to Stanford. However, Stanford much better in strength of record, wins of a bubble, and KPI as well. West Virginia is the one where, if you were to just tell me, like, we've been talking about these teams, 48 to 55 and wins of a bubble or whatever. West Virginia is 68th. Why do I have them here? 5-7 inside quad one. 5 quad one wins for a next 4 out team. Pretty good. 3-5 in quad two isn't great. They're 8-12 inside the first two quadrants. 2-1 in quad three, so they do have a quad three loss. They're 10-13 inside the first 3 quadrants, which is why I do have them next 4 out and 68th in wins above bubble. This could be a team where the committee says, hey, they're a first 4 out team because they're 5-7, or hey, no one deserves this last spot. They have 5 quad one wins. Let's throw them in. I think Stanford has a much better case than West Virginia, obviously, but this is also a team that I think the committee could say this team was not close. Like, they're 68th in wins above bubble. They're 15 teams out. I wouldn't even argue that. I kind of have them just in the middle of the two, have them right here. Oklahoma, who's kind of moved themselves back into a little bit of the conversation. Oklahoma is 57th in wins above bubble, 49th in strength of record. They don't have any bad losses. They're 9-14 inside of the first two quadrants, 3-9 in quad one. So the likes of Oklahoma, Virginia Tech. I don't think I talked enough about Virginia Tech. I'll go back to Virginia Tech. Oklahoma, Virginia Tech, someone like Indiana, Auburn, all kind of similar-ish resumes. They're not good inside quad one. However, they've had a ton of opportunities. So let's kind of talk about, wrong graphic. I'll kind of talk about all these teams. Oklahoma's 54th in the net. You can find 3-9 in quad one. So let's just kind of look at these quad one metrics. Virginia Tech right behind them at 55. They're 2-10 in quad one. However, they're 8-12 inside the first two quadrants with 0 bad losses. Oklahoma 9-14 with 0 bad losses. Move up to someone like Auburn. They're 4-12 in quad one. That's not good. 7-14 inside the first two quadrants with the quad three loss. Get Auburn out of the tournament. They have better metrics, but get them out of the tournament. Indiana, same boat. 3-11 in quad one, 6-13 inside the first two quadrants with not really any bad losses. So it's like, how do you differentiate these teams? I kind of go off the wins above bubble quite a bit and a little bit of the predictives. Like, Indiana has by far the best predictives out of any of these teams. But they don't deserve it to be in the tournament, in my opinion. I think in terms of deserving, it should go Stanford, Virginia Tech. It's like none of these other ones deserve it. I think it's Indiana, Auburn, then Cal, but whatever. Oklahoma State still sort of in the conversation. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about Oklahoma State. You won't even find them on a graphic because they're 79th in the net. However, they're 51st in wins above bubble, 53rd in strength of record, kind of in the same boat as the other teams. 2-10 inside quad one, not very good. However, 9-13 inside the first two quadrants, 0 bad losses outside of the first two quadrants. So I think Oklahoma State's still in the conversation. Cincinnati down to our next 4 out after, suffering that, who'd they just lose to? TCU. They just lost at TCU. 62nd in wins above bubble, 62nd in strength of record. The predictives are much better. They're 30th at Torvik. They're 7-13 inside the first two quadrants with the quad four loss. I just don't think there's enough there. Same goes for San Diego State. San Diego State is not good, in my opinion. They're 7-9 inside the first two quadrants, which isn't bad. 55th in wins above bubble with a quad three loss. Seton Hall, I don't think they really have much of a chance. 58th in wins above bubble, 2 quad three losses, 7-9 inside the first two quadrants, only 7 wins. Boise State, I did also include. Crazier things have happened. Weird resume splits. They're 53rd in wins above bubble. That's not too bad. 72nd in strength of record is kind of weird. However, you go across, they have a quad 1A win. They're 8-9 inside the first two quadrants with a quad three loss, though. However, that 72nd strength of record just sticks out like an eyesore. I don't think they have enough on their non-conference resume to really build it up. They've kind of, picked up some of these wins in conference play. I don't think Boise State has enough to get there, but I didn't eliminate them. I think there is a chance for any of these teams, just kind of relying on the fact that the bubble is so bad this season. So here's what I got as the bubble right now. I will obviously update this on Friday, so be sure to come back for a Friday show. So like I said, Missouri has an 11 seed, NC State is an 11 seed. I do have VCU above SMU. However, if it was split, it would be SMU versus Stanford. And there are 2 ACC teams. Obviously, can't have that. So it'd be Texas, SMU, VCU, Stanford. Moving on to the 12 seeds, let's talk about some of these mid-majors. USF out of the American Conference. They're the 1 seed in the conference, the heavy favorite to win the conference. Only will have to play 2 games to get to 2 games to win the American Conference Championship. I hope they do it. They've been the best team. I'm hoping they get the job done in year 1 under Brian Hodgson. Yale as your next 12 seed out of the Ivy, only a 4-team tournament. I'm not 100% sure it's going to be Yale. Yale has to play Cornell in the first round. They'll play then if they win that game, they'll play the winner of Harvard and Penn. I think your toughest game is Cornell. We'll see if they can get by them. Northern Iowa out of the Missouri Valley. It's not Belmont. Northern Iowa was the 6th seed in the Missouri Valley tournament. However, highly analytically ranked team. They're 70th at KenPom, 25th in defensive efficiency. Watch out for Northern Iowa. This team can be sneaky good. Stephen F. Austin out of the Southland I have as the last 12 seed now. Could be Stephen F. Austin, could be McNeese. These two teams should be battling. McNeese is actually your favorite, but Stephen F. Austin is the 1 seed in the Southland Conference. High Point already clinched out of the Big South. They took down Winthrop in the championship game. I'm a projected 12 or 13 seed. I could see them or Stephen F. Austin going either way in the 12-13 matchup. Liberty, I dropped down to a 13 seed. I don't think Liberty's going to win Conference USA tournament, but they've been the best team in the league all season, but they've been struggling as of late. We'll see if they can hold on. I had them as the last 12 seed in our last bracketology, but they've suffered a couple losses, so got them down to a 13. Utah Valley out of the WAC could be Cal Baptist, but Utah Valley, the class of the league. This Utah Valley team's underrated. I think they're really good. Hofstra just escaped yesterday, a game against Towson where they hit a little banked in 3 in overtime, ended up with a 3-point victory. They will play in the championship game against Monmouth to be the automatic qualifier out of the CAA. It is not UNC Wilmington. It is not Charleston. It is Hofstra versus Monmouth after those other 2 teams got upset. North Dakota State already clinched out of the Summit League. If say Monmouth were to win instead of Hofstra, I think North Dakota State would jump up to that 13 seed. Monmouth would be back as a 14 seed. UC Irvine out of the Big West could be UC Irvine, could be maybe Hawaii. I picked Cal State, Northridge, CSUN, could be anyone in pretty much the Big West, but UC Irvine is the class of the league. They are the 1 seed. Troy already clinched yesterday with a victory over Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern went on an absolute run in the Sun Belt. However, it is Troy, the automatic qualifier. Wright State will play in the championship game against, who are they playing in the championship game against? Robert Morris just lost to, can't remember. Robert Morris lost to someone, but Wright State will play whoever the 3 seed in the Horizon League is. But Wright State is the favorite. In fact, I think I have it on a graphic that we'll talk about here in a second. I can't remember who Wright State's playing because I remember just checking. It's Detroit Mercy. Yeah, how about that story? Fun story of Detroit Mercy going to the championship game because I picked Robert Morris to win this conference tournament. I even bet him, and Robert Morris loses. So I'm Wright State versus Detroit Mercy for that automatic bid out of the Horizon League. Then we got Portland State out of the Big Sky. Montana just took down Northern Colorado and looked really good doing it. So Portland State will play Montana. Idaho will play someone else. We'll preview it here in a second. Just talk about the games to know. And then Merrimack out of the MAAC, they are playing in the championship game. We'll talk about that one here in a second as well. Furman won the SoCon. They took down East Tennessee State. So like I said, I had East Tennessee State as a 14 seed. However, Furman a little lower analytically ranked. So that boosted Wright State to a 14 seed instead of a 15 seed because Furman will take over this 15 seed. And then Queens. How about Queens getting the job done, taking down Central Arkansas to win the ASUN, be our last 15 seed. Tennessee State and Nolan Smith as your first 16 seed already clinched. UMBC is the favorite in the America East, could be Vermont as well. We'll preview that one in a second here. And then LIU versus Howard. LIU has already clinched, even though they haven't technically won their conference championship because they played Mercyhurst in the championship game. Mercyhurst is ineligible, so LIU will be the automatic qualifier in the NEC, and then Howard out of the MEAC, Bethune-Cookman out of the SWAC. These tournaments just now getting started, and then to round us out, we have Lehigh. So it's not. There's been just absolute madness in the Patriot League. Navy got beat by Boston on a 3-pointer at the not technically at the buzzer, but pretty much at the buzzer. Only a couple point seconds left. And then Lehigh took down Colgate. So Lehigh versus Boston University for the final bid in our exact, bracketology. And they will probably be in a play-in game. I would be shocked if they were not, because that would mean a lot of other weird stuff happened and they would boost up, but they will be in a play-in game. All righty, that is the full bracketology. It was nice to be able to talk just bracketology and not talk about some of the results and the seed line changes, like just talking, giving each team their love. So let's just talk about what's going to happen. Let's just talk about tonight. So we got UMass Lowell versus UMBC in the America East, like we talked about. UMBC is favored by 8.5 in this game. This is your America East quarterfinal. That's at 6 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Also in the America East at 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Vermont favored by 12.5 against NJIT. These are true home games for the America East, so these games will be played at UMBC and Vermont. Vermont's favored by 12.5. I'd like to see a UMBC versus Vermont championship game. Have been the best two teams. So the game we mentioned, the NEC championship, Mercyhurst and LIU. You still want to win the conference championship if you're LIU. However, they are already going to the NCAA tournament. LIU's favored by 6.5 in that one. 7 o'clock, CBS Sports Network. Game we talked about, Monmouth and Hofstra battle for the CAA championship. Hofstra favored by 5.5 in that one. Then Detroit Mercy in the horizon, like we said, got to the championship game. What an awesome story there. Taking on Wright State, 7 o'clock ESPN. Wright State's favored by 3.5. The Southland semifinals, Texas A&M Corpus Christi at Stephen F. Austin. Well, I guess at McNeese, technically. McNeese is the host school. Stephen F. Austin favored by 7.5 in that one. Then the WCC championship game. Can Santa Clara leave no doubt about getting into the tournament and just win the championship game against Gonzaga? This is Gonzaga's last WCC championship game as they're moving to the Pac-12 next year. Gonzaga favored by 6.5, 9 o'clock ESPN2. Siena and Merrimack for the MAAC championship. Merrimack favored by 3.5. Siena also a very good, well-coached team. And then the Big Sky semifinals, we get Montana versus Portland State at 9 o'clock on ESPNU. Montana State favored by 2.5. The other Southland semifinal game is UT Rio Grande Valley and McNeese. McNeese, the host school, like we said, favored by 7.5. And then the other Big Sky semifinal game, Idaho and Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington favored by 1.5 at 11:30. The other just power conference games to kind of watch out for. I won't talk about all of them. The Big 12 gets started tonight. The ACC gets started tonight. The Big 10 gets started tonight. I don't think the SEC gets started tonight. I did leave Northwestern versus Penn State off of this graphic. Sorry, I only had room for 8. But here is your your power conference tournaments to watch out for today. Alrighty, that's going to do it. Another successful bracketology episode. Hopefully the mic is sounding better. I know for those who came from the last show, the mic did not sound good, having some mic problems. So hopefully it sounds a little bit better today. I'm going to be back on Thursday, like I said, recapping some of these conference tournaments that are going on and then previewing the rest of conference tournament week. And then Friday, I'm going to have just bracketology, no results, no nothing, just strictly bracketology the entire way through. So be sure to come back for that. I'll obviously be here on Sunday morning to, do the official prediction for bracketology, see how well I can do for, predicting the exact field. And then I will have a live show Sunday night to, like I do every single season, to, kind of interact with people, talk about what they're seeing in terms of, obviously the bracket will be released, asking a couple questions, maybe where the committee got some things like you put them there, stuff like that as we see every single season. You put North Carolina there last season. That was the big one. West Virginia is not in. A couple seasons ago, it was Duquesne's an 11 seed. Are you kidding me? Hey, it worked out. They got a win in the NCAA tournament. But so we'll talk about some of that. Maybe some of your predictions. I'll be able to highlight them. Put the chat directly onto the video screen. So it's just kind of going to be a whole interaction thing. Talk some predictions, initial thoughts, stuff like that. So be sure to come back for that. That will be Sunday. I believe as of now, the plan is 6 o'clock on the East Coast, maybe 6:30 on the East Coast. I will schedule it and it will be labeled. I'll put it on our Instagram, which is at Bracket Science. Be sure to go check that out. And I'll even, schedule it on YouTube so you can come check it out. So be sure to subscribe to the show, turn on post notifications, and then check out our website as well, bracketscience.org. I'll be back on Thursday. Everyone enjoy this week of hoops. Till then, take care.